Welcome to the Fortified Life podcast, where we learn how to develop a dependency on Jesus in the marketplace. From the boardroom to the bathroom, God is with you. Here's our host, author, speaker, teacher, encourager, stewardship coach, and my husband, the man they call Mr. Fortified, Jason Davis.
What's going on, everybody? What is going on? Welcome to the Fortified Life podcast. My name is Jason Davis, aka Mr. Fortify, and I'm excited to be back for another episode. Here on the Fortified Life, we talk about how we build our dependency on Jesus and the marketplace. And we do that by bringing guests on who are unashamed, and they are actively, I say actively, they are listening and hearing from God and making kingdom decisions day to day, whether blue collar, white collar, whether they're an influencer, a CEO, an author, a coach, they're doing it. And we can learn a lot from their stories and their experiences. And it's no different tonight. And I got to tell you, tonight's going to be awesome, folks. This is a powerful woman of God that is our guest tonight. But before I bring her on, let me introduce her to you. Nakeisa Jackson is a registered nurse, author, speaker, and ministry leader of Flow Connection Ministries. She is the founder of Aniyah Space, an organization dedicated to helping women living with HIV. She also coaches women on how to develop their relationship with God, to walk boldly and confidently in what they have been called to do. She reached these women through coaching, blogs, her podcasts, her YouTube channel, and events. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the Fortified Life, Miss Nakeisa Jackson. What's going on, Nakeisa?
Hi, Jason. I'm so excited to be here on your podcast and to just share tonight. So I'm doing well on this Wednesday evening. How are you?
I am good. I love it, Nakeisa. This has been a long time coming. Folks, you all just don't know, Nakeisa is one of my favorite people. She is a powerhouse, and prepare for some wisdom to get dropped tonight. So, Nakeisa, God has graced you to have your hand in so many different things. You know, being a registered nurse, author, a speaker, a minister, and the founder of a nonprofit. But Nakeisa, it wouldn't be right if we didn't take a trip back. One of the most powerful things about your story is your testimony. So just unpack that for us a little bit, how your testimony plays a role into everything that you do now.
Yes, so I would love, that's a really great question. And just thank you for the accolades. I feel like you do a lot too. So it's always good to watch what you do, because I know, like, okay, I'm not alone in this and all the things that God has called me to do. But I will take it back to where I first started even thinking I had something to share. And so this was my first year of college. And I'm 18 years old. It's my first time being out of my parents' house, and I'm just excited. I go to school right down the street to Alabama. I'm from Georgia, originally from Atlanta, and I still live here. And I went to Alabama. I went to Tuskegee. I had a good time. It was a really new experience. But in the middle of my first year, something shifted for me. And what that was I started to not feel well maybe January. It was second semester of my first year. And I didn't feel well, and I didn't know what was going on. And, you know, we're in dorms, so I'm like, everybody's getting sick, but nobody around me was getting sick. I had like flu-like symptoms. And so people were helping take care of me, because I was the only one sick, actually. And a few months later, I went to the health department, where they test you for everything at the health department if you've never been. And I was used to getting tested and doing things like that, because that's one of the things that I was taught in sex education, was to get tested. That's all I knew. So I was comfortable getting tested, and I didn't think anything of it because I had never gotten a call before. So I'm thinking that everything is fine. There shouldn't be any issues. But I got a call back from a gentleman a couple weeks later, And he started asking me these questions. I didn't know what he was talking about. I started feeling confused. I was anxious. And I was like, what is this man talking about? Why is he call? I've never gotten these call back. And so he was like, I need you to come in as soon as possible. So that whole night, I was just like, could not go to sleep because they tested me for everything. So eventually I convinced myself that it was small and he just doing routine so I could sleep. And the crazy thing about this story is that I don't have a car, number one. I think when I went there to get tested, I had got transportation from the school. So I didn't have a car to get there at 8 o'clock in the morning. So I had to coordinate some stuff. So I'm asking people. I asked somebody for their car, and then I asked somebody to drive me because I had a license, but I just wasn't that good at driving. And I was also nervous, so I didn't know what was going to happen. And I remember I walked in, and I'm sitting in the doctor's office, and they take me to the back really, really fast, like super fast. And I'm like, something's not right. And this man starts reading off these test results to me. And then he pauses, and he says, your HIV results are positive. And in that moment, I'm a 19-year-old girl. I literally just got saved 2 months before I got my diagnosis. And that's the part of the story that sometimes does not come out. So I just got saved. So I just discovered who God really was. Like I just got baptized. So I'm very new to walking with God, new to Christianity, new to this life. And I'm like, what just happened? And I remember this man just continuing to talk to me and talk to me and talk to me. And I got up in the middle of him talking and I walked out because it was nothing else that he could say, because all I knew was what I heard about HIV, that you weren't going to live long, that you like just all these myths, that you were timid, that I didn't think it happened to women. I thought it happened to either like older women or men. I never knew a woman at 19 could get, like, I didn't think it could really happen to me. And so I just remember me walking out and him trying to convince me to go back. So I went back, but it took a few days for him to get all of the information that he needed from me, because it was just so overwhelming because I didn't know where to go. I'm in this small town. It's not a lot of resources. They're not giving me a lot of information. He doesn't have a lot of compassion. I feel like he just wanted to check mark his paperwork. And it came down to the realization of like, okay, it's just me and God, because I just met God and I know God is real. And I'm like, I don't know what to do in this moment. Like, do I prepare to die? Do I prepare to live? Like, it's so many thoughts that go through your head. And I remember I went to God in prayer. And this is back, Jason, if I could be honest, this was back when people would say you can't hear from God yourself, which we know is not true. That's back when I was going to a regular, like, I think non-denominational church, and nobody talked about hearing the voice of God for yourself. Nobody talked about the prophetic. Nobody talked about any of these things. But I knew for a fact that I could hear from God. Even when I first got saved, I knew. And I remember God said to me, I said, God, why would you save me if I was just going to die? Like, it was no need to save me. You could have just left me in the world. I didn't have to have this experience with you. You could have left me alone. I just remember being very upset because I'm very new. So I'm still thinking God's a genie. I'm still thinking that because I'm saved, nothing should happen to me. Nothing bad should happen to me. Like, everything should be good because I got God, I got Jesus. So there's no reason for anything bad to happen. And what God spoke to me about, he said that I'm going to use this. I'm going to teach you how to live, because you're going to live and you're going to make it, and you're going to overcome this. And he started to share with me all these amazing things that I would do. And here we are at 2023. I'm living them out. But back then, as a first-year college student, I said, I will never tell my story. I will never share my testimony. I will never tell people that I'm living with HIV. Why would I do that? Young Black girls don't share their stories. You don't talk about HIV. It's taboo. I'm from the Bible Belt. You don't even talk about having sex. And I wasn't even saved, and I knew better than that. So it was very tough to navigate. I want to say those first years, it was just hard to navigate because I didn't have an example. I had little like things I would say like breadcrumbs that I would follow. So like I found one girl who had a book. I found out about one conference that I could go to. I found these little pockets of spaces where I could see people who looked like me, but I didn't have a close relationship with anybody that looked like me, that was living with HIV, that met the same demographic. So it was a very difficult thing just to navigate during that time, especially with the state of just the world and where I was in life, like being a young college student, fresh out of high school, not knowing what to do.
My goodness, Nakeisa, you're 19, you're brand new to the faith, and then you get this type of diagnosis. I can't even imagine the level of emotion running through your mind. That's just unbelievable. And like you said, fast forwarding to 2023, where you are now encouraging other people and telling your story and your testimony. Like, what was the turning point for you? Because we know you know, as far as being a nurse and then eventually becoming an author and a speaker. So what kind of set you down that health path? Like, okay, this is the condition I have, but I want to start living my life, and what am I going to do about it? What was kind of that turning point in the midst of all that emotion for you?
So that's a really, really great question. So what led me down this path of health was actually God. So once I got the realization that I was going to live, I started to all of a sudden feel like I was supposed to go to nursing school. I was in school for construction management. I wasn't thinking about being a nurse. I wasn't even considering it. And then God told me I need to transfer and come back home. Like, you need to go back home. So I ended up coming back home to Georgia State. And shout out to Georgia State Nursing School. It's one of the best nursing schools ever, okay? I just want to say that. It's one of the best nursing schools, and it's one of the hardest to get in. And so when he told me to do this, I was like, there's no way that I'm going to get into this nursing school. So I got into nursing school, and then I became a nurse. And before I got into nursing school, he told me that at some point I'm going to open a clinic. He was like, you're going to open a clinic, so you need to go to nursing school to see what the issues are, to see what it's like to be in that field, because I want you to have some knowledge. And that started off one way of me learning how God works with me, because usually he makes me go do it first before I can like outsource it and get other people to help me. So I went to nursing school. I became a nurse, and I started to see the discrepancies in healthcare. I started to see that just because you're a healthcare provider, it doesn't mean that you know how to care for people living with HIV. It doesn't mean you have compassion. It doesn't mean you understand the multifacetedness of living with HIV. Like, you may understand one part, but you don't understand the whole thing. So I started seeing all these issues and how it wasn't the care wasn't competent care. It didn't consider a lot of things. It was just not, it just wasn't the best care that could be given from my eyesight and from what God was telling me. Then I always felt like I was always the one with the information. It was a big disconnect between the community and healthcare centers. And I was like, why don't you know what's in the community around the corner? And when I look at it in the grand scheme of things, it's because they're seeing everything, not just people living with HIV, but it's still not an excuse why there should not be some type of connection. Because I would know the resources, and I would be like, well, if I wasn't here, how would they got help? Who would have went out and went the extra mile to get the resource? So I started seeing these issues, and then, I did the thing like, it's all these issues that need to be fixed. Somebody need to fix it. And I looked up, it was like 2016. And by this time I'm married. I did all these things that I thought that I couldn't do. I'm married. I got the job I want. I'm like living my best life. But I started to feel this thing in my heart, and like something is missing. Something is going on. There's something else I'm supposed to be doing, and this is not it. Being a nurse is not it. Because, you get into the usual day-to-day life of how you live in your life, and it's just like one day something goes off. And what happened was my friend started her ministry, and she was telling me she was writing her book and all stuff, and I was kind of inspired. And I said, oh, that's so great. I'm proud of what God's doing for you. I'm still not ready. Like, in my mind, I wasn't ready. But what was happening was God started to show me, like, you're helping all these people in private. You're helping people at your job. You're helping, like, if people would come to me who knew I had HIV, if they would come in my personal life and ask for help, I would give them assistance. He was like, you're doing all of these things. But there are more people that you're supposed to help. And I was like, I can't help all those people. And I ended up taking this class, and they told us you need to do a passion project. And I was like, oh, what can I do? And then I was like, I'm going to start a business. I was like, I'm going to start a t-shirt business. I'm going to write a blog. I had all of these ideas. And I sat down with a business coach, and he was like, the idea you need to run with is you need to tell a story about living with HIV. And I was like, I don't want to do that. And I just kept saying, I don't want to do it. I kept saying, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. And then I said, okay, I'll just write a piece of a book. So I wrote the basic testimony of going into the doctor's office. And one person was like, "You're a great storyteller." And I promise you, I just ran with it and I wrote the book.
Wow. My goodness. And that's actually a perfect segue, Nakeisa, because I was going to get into that. So I believe it's A Lover's Journey, the name of that. And just talk about, I know you were hesitant at first, but what is the book about, and what do you want readers, and yes, readers are leaders, but what do you want the readers to know most about this publication?
Okay, so I have two books. So my second book is A Lover's Journey that I just released. And I would say that while that's not the book with my direct testimony, my direct testimony is a book I wrote called Life After HIV Removing the Mask. I think A Lover's Journey is a good book to talk about because it encompasses that testimony. And so the biggest takeaway I want people to know about my book, A Lover's Journey, is understanding that it is a journey and it does not stop. Learning how to love yourself and see yourself in the way that God sees you is a lifelong journey. I don't think it ever stops because once I got this HIV diagnosis, I had to really learn how to love myself more than I've ever had to love myself before, because I know what they were saying about people living with HIV. I know what they said about women, men, children. I knew about the stigma. And I just refused to let that infiltrate me and infiltrate my mind and then stop me from the things that I knew I was destined to do, because I'm in college. I'm going to graduate. I'm going to nursing school. I have all these amazing things happening. I'm not what people are trying to portray. Right? I'm not any of those things as far as what they're saying in the media, what people are saying that don't know me, who just got myths about HIV. So I was like, I got to really learn how to love myself at the core. So the biggest takeaway is really that it is a journey to really love yourself. And this book, A Lover's Journey, will really help you break down love, what God says about love, my own journey of what I used to think love was, and then really just using that to discover your purpose and what God really wants you to do. Because I took that journey and I started that journey, that's how I discovered that I was supposed to start a nonprofit, that I was supposed to write books, that I was supposed to minister, all these things that I don't think I would have been able to do that without love, because I wouldn't have felt worthy enough, and I wouldn't have felt like God could have chosen me of all the people he could have chosen. So that would be my biggest takeaway from that book.
Love it, folks. You need to make sure you get a copy. I know I've got mine. So Nakeisa, are both books, are they available on Amazon, or where can people get them?
Yes, you can get both books on Amazon. And if you go to my Instagram page, I do have a bundle where you can get 2 signed copies and a bookmark and some other things directly from me, but they are both on Amazon. So feel free to go in there and grab your copy.
Okay, now y'all heard straight from the author, right? You want a signed copy. She just told you what it is and where to get them. So make sure. We'll have all this in the show notes too. Ladies and gentlemen, so don't worry. You're like, oh man, what did Nakeisa say? Where do I get it? We'll have it in the show notes. And that's the beauty of going back and listening to something on demand like a podcast.
Yes.
So Nakeisa, there's just so many threads. Every time I've been fortunate to hear your story in multiple contexts over the years. And what I love is just the resiliency, and stemming from you know, scripture tells us to love your neighbor as yourself. And so you really went down that journey, and then developing the courage and the boldness. So we have the path of being a registered nurse. Then we develop the courage to write the book. And then you start a nonprofit. It just continues. So talk about just the idea for that and how Aniyah Space developed.
Yes, I would love to talk about that. So with my first book, I wrote my first book, Life After HIV Removing the Mask. And while I was preparing for the book signing, I was like, this is a perfect opportunity to educate people. So I turned it into an educational event. I found community partners and things like that. And when I finished the event and I got all the proceeds from the book sales, God was like, okay, take that money and start a nonprofit. I heard it very clear. I did not know what it was going to be called. I didn't know anything. But he was like, start a nonprofit to help women living with HIV. And that's pretty much all I knew. So it was kind of like one of those obedience things where I have a prior experience in business experience. Because I've like worked for my uncle. I have a family of entrepreneurs. So I know the basics of starting a business. I know how to go find your name and all that stuff. So I did that because that's the knowledge that I had at the current time, right? So I did that. I got all the paperwork that I could get with the amount of money that I had. And I just kind of sat there and I was like, I don't know what to do now, God. All these people are asking me to speak. People are asking me to come out of state to do vendor events, to sell my book. And actually, I think I'm good with just writing the book. So what I'm going to do is I got this nonprofit like you told me to, but I'm going to sit it down, right? I'm going to sit it down because I don't know what I'm doing. And I don't want to look like a fool. I don't want to embarrass myself. And wasn't the book enough? And I was like, the book wasn't enough. It was just the start. You sharing your story about HIV wasn't even enough. Like, it's time for you to take this to the next level. So I said with God, like, what am I supposed to do with this? And he was like, he really reminded me of my life experience, what I went through when I was diagnosed, of having to navigate things by myself. I had to navigate the healthcare system by myself. Like, it was a lot of things I had to navigate by myself, a lot of education I did on my own that I did not know prior to my diagnosis because I needed to find out the truth about HIV. I had all of these resources, and because I'm the type of person that when she needs something, she's going to go find it. I had made all these partnerships in the community. So I started finding places. I started finding these women that were living with HIV. And because I shared my story so publicly, which I don't think I mentioned, before I put out a book, I shared my story on YouTube. My inbox started flooding with women. Like women from different countries, different states, different areas, women that looked like me, women that didn't look like me. And I didn't know what to do with it. My inbox got crazy. I couldn't respond to everybody. And I was like, what am I supposed to do with all of these women? And I put them in a group. And I said, I'm starting a support group because that's all I knew. So in the beginning, a nice place was just a support group where we went live once a month. It was nothing in person because I did not know what I was doing. And God just began to tell me that the purpose of the organization is really to provide holistic care services, meaning we don't just look at if your physical health is okay. We want to look at your emotional health, your mental health. We want to look at if you have housing, do you have food to eat, things like that, because there are so many factors that stems around having an HIV diagnosis. And what I found in my own research is that mental health is very important, and then also social support, because social support and having make sure your mental and emotional wellness is well. It helps you stay in care. It helps you stay connected so that your physical health won't suffer as a result. So once I discovered that, I just took all that together, and of course with my nursing knowledge, to build out this social welfare kind of organization that's now moving towards getting a building, being able to build out the actual clinic part that God told me about well over 10 years ago when I was first diagnosed.
Folks, if you're not encouraged hearing this, then you're just not paying attention. I don't know how you couldn't be moved. That is powerful, Nakeisa. It just never ceases to amaze me. So if those of you heard of the 7 mountains or the 8 streams of influence. So there's healthcare, there's business, and then you have a nonprofit, and then there's ministry, Nakeisa. So as you're helping and supporting women, knowing your backstory and the industries that you've worked in, how does that help your approach to ministry?
Oh yes, I love this question. Now this is my area. I know you're probably listening like, oh, this girl talks about this. Now ministry, that's like my best friend. That's my baby. So what I found out about me and ministry is that what was happening is whenever I would speak, when the words would come out of my mouth, God would come out of my mouth because I had a relationship with God. So scripture would fall out of my mouth. And next thing I know, I'm dropping wisdom. Didn't I know it? Next thing I'm ministering to people or I'm talking to people, and people are like, how do you know that? And how did you know I was dealing with that? And I'm like, I don't know how I know that, but I'm just telling you what I think is coming from my knowledge base. I wish I could tell you something else. I didn't even know that a lot of this was coming from God because I would just be saying it. So I didn't like go pray for a long time, or it was just prophetic. I should say that's the best way to describe it. It was prophetic. And I would say, God, I won't stop talking because every time I talk about you, and that's not my intent. That wasn't my goal. My goal was to talk about something else, but some kind of way I get back to talking about you, and I don't want to overdo it. I don't want to be saying stuff that's not true. I don't want to be responsible for that. And what started happening was, as I continued my journey to love myself, I started to accept that part of me. And I started to say, well, you know, this is who I am. Like, I need to accept that this is who I am. I talk to God and he comes out of me. You can tell when I talk, and it's like, I have to learn how to embrace that part of me too. So the more I embraced it, the more he came out. And I started doing many things. Like I would do a 21-day. I remember I did a 21-day challenge. And this was outside of my nonprofit. So I would do this like under maybe my book brand or something. So I did a 21-day challenge about how to get redeemed, like how to allow God's love to redeem you. And I was like, I don't know what's going on. I did a 7-day journey to love yourself, like a self-love challenge. I started doing these creative things to help people learn about God, because that's how I connected with God. So I never had a relationship with God where all I did was just like pray or sit there. I would do things like journal. I would do things like just draw and create and write poetry and do different things. And I was like, this is amazing. And God was like, this is something you could share with other people. You could teach other people how to do this. And I was like, no way. And he was like, you can. And I want you to start Bible study. So, Jason, I started in my house. I did Bible study in my house right before the pandemic came. And I was just doing it, and I was very comfortable. So I just want to do it in my house. I had a couple people come over. I would make food, and we would do it in my house. The pandemic hit, everybody was staying in their house. So then I was like, what am I supposed to do with this? And I spoke to my spiritual leader, and she was like, it's just time for you to share in another kind of way. It's time for you to start ministering. So what I did was I started just a simple prayer call. Well, I guess I shouldn't say simple, but I started this prayer call, and I launched a ministry. It's called Flow Connection Ministries. And we still do different, like, unique things, but we do like worship calls. We do these things called obedience nights, where we just get together and talk about what we're supposed to be doing and how we're going to make sure we actually do it. We do prayer calls, and we've had like a couple of like challenge, like virtual events. And this year we're going to get into doing some live events. So it's a very unique ministry, but it's really just about teaching women how to connect to God for themselves. So getting away with the old thought that you can't hear from God. And it's about activating people in being able to hear the voice of God for themselves, and then making sure that they are doing some of those things that, for some of us, it comes natural to just obey, right? But then for some of us, like me, it's struggle, but we know that it's required. We know that when we are disobedient, we kind of knock ourselves out of the will of God. And then we open up doors that could be shut if we would just be obedient. And so I felt like I had a call to really share that with people and help them understand that is, you know, it's not about your feelings and all this kind of stuff, but it's really just about your obedience, and everything else will fall in place. But I first had to go through it, and then I was able to share with other people. So I'm really excited just about like what God's going to do through the ministry. It's just been a beautiful thing. So many people have really learned and grew throughout that ministry.
Wow, that's so awesome to hear, Nakeisa. And you could just tell when even in answering the question, I was like, man, did you all hear the shift in her voice? She said, oh, let me tell you all about what God has been doing from the ministry perspective. I love that, Nakeisa. My goodness. You definitely want to keep track of Flow Connection Ministries and everything that Nakeisa is doing. We'll have links in the show notes. Now, Nakeisa, I wanted to come back to something earlier. You talked about mental and emotional wellness, not just talking about the diagnosis of HIV, but also just the other health factors. What are some practical things that people can do to try to strengthen their mental and emotional wellness?
So I can say a lot of things, but I'm figuring I'm have about three things to say. The first thing is I would say is that we all have to be self-aware, and that may not be the easiest for everyone, but one thing is just always checking in with yourself. Like, how am I actually feeling today? How am I actually doing today? Have I been rested? Did I sleep well? Like, really taking a look at yourself, because sometimes we're getting overwhelmed and we are being super hard on ourselves because of other factors. So, for example, I'll give you a real example. You've been up all night working on your business. You get 3 hours of sleep. So in the morning, you're like, I gotta go. But you're really feeling anxious and worried, and you really need to rest. But because you didn't check in with yourself, you're just continuing your cycle. So it's really like you've been up for days and days and days nonstop, and you haven't really had a break. And then if you're anything like me, sometimes, like, I like to be productive. So when I'm not productive, sometimes I tell myself I'm being lazy. But because I check in, I can rectify it and say, no, I'm not being lazy. I've been working 3 or 4 days straight. I've been out of town. I had a speaking engagement. I've done all this. I haven't rested. And so then I can overcome the battle of the mind. So the first thing is really just checking in with yourself. And the second thing is journaling. I don't care if it's just one line and you say today is hard, or one line today is great, or I'm thankful for life today. But really getting your emotions out of your head and getting them on paper and keeping a record is very, very helpful, because you can go back and look and say, hey, at the top of February, I was feeling really sad, but it's March 1st and I feel much better because I changed how I ate last month, or I took more breaks last month. And now I feel so much better. And then you can kind of discover what helps you, right? When you felt happy on Valentine's Day, what made you feel happy, right? When you felt happy because it was Friday, was it because it was Friday? And then you could start seeing a pattern with your life. Like, from doing this, I learned my energy levels are better in the evening and later in the week. So you know what I did? I changed my schedule as a result. So it helps me navigate some of the things that naturally happen with me and my moods and how I feel throughout the week. But also it helped me make sure that my mental and emotional wellness was okay. Because so then if I seen like, hey, it's been 4 days and you haven't been feeling that well, maybe today is a day to do a self-care day, which is my third tip. I always make time for self-care. Like, I don't care if you just need a day where you sleep all day and eat popcorn and watch TV. Because, like, do not let your finances, your friends, your family members, no one around you stop you from having a self-care day. At least, and that's the bare minimum, once a month. I really feel like you should do it once a week, but I understand. So once a month, just a day for you, like the same love you give to your children, your spouse, the people around you, your loved ones, you have to give it back to you and take care of yourself, because as the cliche goes, you can't pour from an empty cup. So if you've been pouring and your cup is empty, what have you really been giving? Have you really been giving them the God in you like you say you have, but you're depleted? So how could you have done that? And everybody won't notice it, especially if you're the strong friend, or if people see you doing a lot and they look up to you. They don't really know when you're struggling, and you can't expect them to know, but you can start to discover the cues that you give off of when you're struggling. And it's just important that you take care of yourself, because you have to prioritize it.
See, I told you all she was going to drop some gold tonight. I told you. I hope you've been taking notes. That was very good, Nakeisa, and you really spelled out the practicality of it, because sometimes people don't think about things. Nakeisa, you talked about, hey, be honest with yourself instead of trying to plow through and push through. It's like, am I actually okay today? And how often do we pause to do that? That's really insightful. So thank you for sharing that. Keisa, one of the things that's been bouncing around in my mind during our conversation is the way that God moved in your life and how you have not allowed the stigma of HIV to prevent you from doing anything God has called you to do. And you've been very transparent about that journey. But I wanted to ask you as well, what's maybe some of the biggest misconceptions about HIV. I feel like it's so polarizing with rumors and there's a lot of chatter, but what are some things that we don't know about it that we actually should be more considerate of and be more knowledgeable about?
Okay. So my favorite thing to teach is something called U equals U. And it means undetectable equals untransmittable. So the biggest misconception that people have is that when you have an HIV diagnosis, naturally you're gonna you can transmit it, you can give it to your children, and all these things. But with proper care and treatment, you actually are unable to transmit HIV via sex, and also to your children. So you can have HIV negative babies, HIV negative partners. And so that's a very important point that I like to share. And this has a group of people living with HIV started to really mobilize this movement around 2015 or 16. They started to really share about it and speak out loud about it because it had been around for a while, but it had not been publicized. So it took a lot of HIV advocates coming forward and starting these campaigns to share about that. So that's the first thing I want to share, that's the biggest misconception. So you can go on and have children, and it doesn't really, if you don't allow it to, it won't stop what God has for you, right? And another, I think, misconception is always about how HIV is transmitted. So I'm just going to wrap this in a nutshell. It's important that you get educated. Like, go learn the fact you can't get it from shaking hands, sweat, hugging, sharing eating utensils and things like that. That is not a route of transmission for HIV. So you got to really educate yourself, because education will kill stigma, and it does not matter where you sit. Meaning, if you're HIV positive or HIV negative, it doesn't matter where you sit on either side of this fence. You can still go out and educate yourself and then advocate for another person, because you never know. I remember I said this before. It could be someone in your life right now that's living with HIV but has not shared with you because of your own biases and how you are and your rigidness, right? And not being open-minded. And this person probably really would want to tell you, but when we aren't seeing someone who's open-minded and caring, it could be really hard to disclose information. And one thing I do know about HIV is that being in isolation is not it's not an ideal situation. So we have to make sure that we as a people as a whole are willing to educate ourselves, because you never know. HIV doesn't have a face. It does not discriminate. It can happen to anyone. And it's important that we as a people all combine together to really combat stigma, so we don't have these misconceptions and lies that happened, that were going on way back in the 80s and early 90s, that we've learned so much information in 40 years, because it's been like over 40 years now, and we have so much information, and it is amazing the things that they have found. And if we don't educate ourselves, we're still going to be stuck even in 2023 when it's 2036. And so stuff is changing every day, and you just have to be willing to do the research, get educated, and participate in advocating.
That's good, Nakeisa. I appreciate you breaking that down for us, because there has been a lot of breakthroughs. So I love that. Education helps kill the rumors, and then there's just the empathy part, like just, your fellow brothers and sisters and friends, just be there and love one another. So I love what you were saying there. Nakeisa, you have so much going on because God has graced you to be able to handle it. And I know you've questioned, oh man, Lord, you want me to do this and do that. I share that sentiment with you at times. But Nakeisa, what would you say you're most excited about for this upcoming year in 2023?
And this is going to be something that I've kind of shared and teased a little bit on my Instagram, but I haven't actually shared. So I'm excited to share it here, because I finally finished my step 1 in obedience to this. But what I'm most excited about this year is just creating content and producing content. So I have written some poetry, And apparently, I kind of feel like you, Jason, it has to be an album. So I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to do that. Now, I have snuck and done poetry on my podcast before, which I've put down. I need to pick it back up. But I've snuck and done it on there. I used to do this little segment and like throw a poem at the very end. So it's like if you listen to my whole podcast, you catch it. And I did it for like 2 years. And then God was like, no, it's time. So he started telling me last year. So I finally got to the 10th poem because he was like, just do 10. He gave me a theme. And so it's going to be entitled, I Am Not Fragile. And it's going to be 10 poems behind some beats. And so I haven't got really far in it, but I'm really excited to get that out. And also I wrote a play and I have more books to come. So I'm just really excited to create content. It's just the next step. God's been telling me for a couple years that I'm just going to be a content creator because I would get frustrated in my own gifts of writing because I used to feel like I just write everything. Like, why do I keep writing all these books and they ain't out yet? Why I keep writing all this stuff? It's not out yet. Why I'm creating all these things? And God was like, this is the year to produce a lot of things I created in years before. So that's what I'm most excited about, just to create, and most excited about the poetry album because it's something new. I've never produced music before, so or portrait music behind it. So I'm excited about it.
And I'm excited for you. Listen, folks, people debut things here on the Fortified Life. It's about the third or fourth time somebody was like, wow. Well, Jason, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to break this here. So listen, that's why you all got to tune in. You never know what our guests are going to bring. They bring freebies and debut books and podcasts. I love that, Nakeisa. And I know I'm looking forward to your poetry as well as some of the other plays and things you're going to write. And I will definitely be praying for you. It reminds me, Nakeisa, because about 1.5 years ago, I did my first song as well. And it was some spoken word and poetry. So I remember I share that with you. I'm like, Lord, I don't know. But when he gives it to you, he gives it to you.
Yes.
Well, Nakeisa, we are out of time, and I have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. And I know that anybody listening, you all need to go back and listen to this on demand when we get it posted. But Nakeisa, where can people reach out to you? How can listeners connect to everything that you're doing?
Okay, so the best place to reach out to me is on my page, Nikki J. the Author. It's Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. You can find me on all platforms, even on YouTube. And then you can get connected to the rest of my pages. So if you want to get connected to the ministry, if you need support groups, I'll definitely get you that link. It's aniyahspace.org, and that's where you can find out more about how to give and how to connect with us and support the work that we're doing. But Nikki J. the Author is the best way to find me on social media. It's just the easiest. And that's Nikki, the letter J, the Author. So that's the best place to find me.
All right. Well, folks, you know where to find her now. So that means when she releases her plays and poetry, it's time to go support. I know that I will. But Nakeisa, just greatly appreciate you coming on the Fortified Life here tonight.
Thank you so much, Jason, for having me.
For sure. Folks, you know how we leave things. That's all we have for tonight. But we'll be back for another week, another episode, another person who is unashamedly living out their faith in the marketplace. From the boardroom to the bathroom, God is with you. Don't compartmentalize your faith in the marketplace. We'll see you next time on the Fortified Life podcast.
Thank you for listening to the Fortified Life podcast. You can catch us live on Wednesdays at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time and on demand. Check out fortifiedlifepodcast.com for more details. To learn how to live out your faith in the marketplace, grab a copy of Jason Davis's book, Fortified, Being Rooted in God's Plan for Work and Business. Available on Amazon.
You listening to Joe Sly Worldwide Podcast.
You've decided to move and picked the neighborhood you prefer, but how much home can you afford? Which loan term is best? Start by contacting an Arundel Federal Savings Bank loan officer to get the numbers you need and a pre-qualification letter to present to your realtor. No cost to you. Whether building or buying, Arundel Federal wants to be the local community bank that you trust and think of for your home mortgage. Contact us today at arundelfederal.com. A pre-qualification is not a loan approval or commitment to make a loan. Additional terms and conditions apply. Member FDIC and equal housing lender at MLS number 671636.
Everyone loves TV Dad.
On the next TV Dad presented by Progressive, TV Dad explains becoming a man.
Son, it's time we had the talk.
Okay, TV Dad.
You know, drivers who switch and save with Progressive could save hundreds.
Oh, is that why my voice is changing?
That's a question for your health teacher.
Listen to your TV Dad. Drivers who switch and save with Progressive could save hundreds. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates. Potential savings will vary.